G'day there. You're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today on the channel we're going to continue exploring the pyRevit platform. Today we're looking at quite an important topic, which is how to construct your own toolbar before you begin adding tools to it. It's quite hard for me to teach you anything else until I show you this. Now there's a really great system in pyRevit where you essentially just build your toolbar out of folders and guidance files, which are called YAML files in this case, or bundles. And we're effectively just going to build a simple toolbar using a few different types of push buttons. There is a lot of documentation available on all of this on the Readthedocs website for pyRevit, but I will try to cover at least the fundamental types of tools you'll use, and we'll also have a look at just creating some very simple tools that open web links and just display messages in pyRevit. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to look at a few different ways you can configure your own toolbar in pyRevit today. In this case, we'll be looking mostly at a special type of button called a URL button, which opens a web link. We will look at more advanced tools in later videos. If you do go to pyRevit Readthedocs, there will be a section called extensions and commands, and you'll find a whole bunch of information of types of buttons and commands you can trigger using pyRevit. But today we're just going to focus on a few simple types such as push buttons, pull downs, and URLs. In the next video, we'll have a look at how to associate Dynamo scripts with these, and then in the next video after that, we'll have a look at how to associate Python scripts with them. So what we'll do is we'll just open Revit, and if you do want to add a toolbar in pyRevit, you're going to want to go to the pyRevit toolbar and come down here to pyRevit settings. And I currently have one toolbar added, pyRevit, my own toolbar, and you can see all you have to do is add the folder path to where you're keeping those files. Now let's just have a quick look at the structure of one of those typical folders. So if I go to the folder I'm pointing to, in this case I have an extension folder, and then I have the main body of the tool. So we have a tab, and then from there we build our tool. But let's build a custom tool now instead. So I'm going to create a new Explorer environment window. And I'm just going to build it probably from my desktop in this case, but you probably would want to store this somewhere on a server typically. So to begin with, I'm going to make a new folder, and I'll just call this my tool. And in here, I'm going to want to place my actual tool that I want to point to. So I'm going to begin with my tool, and I'm going to put .extension after the folder. And this is basically how we inform pyRevit of the structure of our folder. Now inside our extension, we can actually start building our toolbar. Typically you'll have a few different folders in here. The first one you may have is a very common programming concept where we keep a folder called bin. And we just put various resources that we might need to run our tool or work in progress components in the bin. We may also have a folder called hooks, which might contain tools that override the behavior of Revit using pyRevit, or maybe calling on commands when things happen. And finally, I'm going to create a tab in my actual toolbar. So I'm going to call this mytools.tab. And in here, we can start constructing our toolbar. So inside the tab, I'm now going to create two panels. I'll just create a panel called testing.panel, and that should be a capital. I think that's the only one that usually is capital. And then we'll just make another one called testing2.panel. Now we're going to use a file in order to construct, in this case, our folder. So we're going to use what's called a YAML file. This is a special type of file format that pyRevit uses to prompt how things should be constructed. So I can see a typical YAML file here as an example. You can see I'm just saying to put two things in a particular order with a divider between them. So I'm going to use that same layout, but instead I'm going to point to testing and testing2. And in this case, I'm actually telling these to be separated with a clear divider as well. I'm using Notepad++ here, so you may want to use that as well. And now I can just inform this file to be a YAML file as well. And you'll notice that creates an association between the variables. So I'm going to save to this particular folder, my YAML file. And I'm going to call this bundle.yaml. And this will effectively inform the order that these objects appear based on their name. What I can do now is actually start building tools inside here. So let's begin with a very simple tool. In this case, I'm going to build what's called a URL button in this case. So this will literally just open a web link. So I'm going to put this in a folder, and I'm just going to call this tool.url button. And in this tool, I can build how this tool actually works. So I'm just going to make a new text document. I might actually just make a Python script and save it to here. So I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to nominate my language as Python. Now we're going to learn how to build Python tools later on, but for now I'm just going to say print, this is my tool, and actually this is going to be for a push button. So what I might do is build an actual URL button. Here's an example of what the bundle for a URL file could look like. So I'm going to take this content, switch my language to Python, to YAML, sorry, and I'm going to give this a title. So in this case, you can actually override the name of tools. So let's just call this Open GitHub. You can give this a tooltip as well. So I can say Open the Aussie BIM Guru GitHub. I believe you can also specify the author of the tool as well. So I'll try that. And finally, we have our hyperlink that we open when we open this. So I'll just reduce this down to the Aussie BIM Guru GitHub. I'm going to save as, and I'm going to save this into my particular tool button folder. And this special bundle file effectively will tell pyRevit to open this in a web browser. So what I'm going to call this is bundle.yaml. The title of the button is specified here. I might just call it GitHub, actually. And finally, we can just get a logo for this. Usually I like to use icons 8, which you can find as a button in pyRevit. And let's just get a little icon for GitHub. Typically icons 8 is pretty easy to use. So you just got to search for something. So let's look for GitHub. There'll definitely be a button for GitHub, no doubt. There we go. And usually I find that the best icon size is typically 96 times 96 in PNG. That's usually my preference. There's other types of files, SVG files, PDF, etc. But typically for pyRevit, I find 9696 is best. So I'm going to call this icon.png. So that name is quite important. You're going to want to make sure that you're using the right name so that pyRevit knows that is the icon. So in my tab, in my panel, in my tool, I can also give this button an icon as well. What I'm also going to do is build just a simple Python tool. This one's called a push button. So I'm going to call this say hi.pushbutton. And this time we need to actually provide a Python script to this as well. So I'm going to make I'll probably just save a file actually. I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to make sure it's in Python. And I'm just going to use a very simple Python command called print. Now, if you've used Python for Dynamo, you probably haven't actually seen print very often. Print is sort of like returning a value, but we return it through what's called a console. So this is a message that pyRevit will show us. I don't believe I need to import any libraries. I think I should just be able to print. So I'm just going to say, hello, this is working. And I'm going to save this, and then I'm just going to put this under my push button folder. And I'll just call this say hi. Actually, I'll call this script, sorry, script.pushbutton. I believe that the script has to at least end with script.py in order to be registered as the tool itself. I'm also just going to create a new bundle, and I'm just going to save this to that folder instead, so that we can specify some of the properties of this particular object still. We don't need the hyperlink anymore, but we'll just say this tool is actually called say hi, and we'll just say returns a message if it works, which it hopefully should. So we have two tools in two panels at this point. We'll have a look at one more type of tool after this, but let's actually have a look at our ribbon. And let's just get a simple icon for our say hi tool. Very simple tool. I'll just look up hello and hopefully we'll get a wave, or there we go. You can build your own logos if you like. I actually do tend to build my own logos, or at least start with a logo and then develop on top of it, because technically these are meant to be attributed back to the author. But for now, I'll just use this icon. So what we can do in pyRevit now is go back to the settings tab. and add a folder. And I'm just going to navigate to that particular folder for my tool. And I'll save settings and reload. And we should hopefully see, our panels and tabs appear on our toolbar. You may get some warnings if you've made any errors, but in this case we can see we now have a tab called My Tools, and I can see two panels with a separator between them. And then we also have our two tools. So if I run my GitHub tool, you can see those YAML properties now appearing in those properties of the tool. And there we go. We can see that the URL button has taken us to a link. And if we run our say Hi tool, we can see that this is the pyRevit console. So this is where messages or errors will be displayed if something doesn't work in pyRevit. Let's try doing something that wouldn't actually work in pyRevit. So one thing I really like about pyRevit is when you update a Python script, pyRevit is going to run that updated Python script. You don't have to reload anything. So it's going to run this script. So let's try to do something that we know won't work. Let's say that variable letter, we'll say variable sum equals 5 plus 3, but 5 is a string. So we're trying to add a string to a number. If I save this Python script and I run say hi again, we can see that my tool has now changed. Then we can see we're getting a specific error as well. Of course, in this case, we're getting a message that we're trying to add a string to an integer. So you also get lots of helpful messages here that might tell you where your script is going wrong, or at the very least, it will usually tell you which line your tool is breaking on, which is very helpful. We can add all sorts of conditional logic that Python typically supports, such as try and except. So I can try this, and if it works, I can say print this is working. But I can also say if it doesn't, then print that it didn't work. So we can add conditional logic to Python to protect our script from breaking or to create different outcomes. And this will become very important later on when we're trying to do things to Revit models that may not always potentially work under particular scenarios. So the last thing I might show in constructing a toolbar is a drop down and also a stack, or a pull down and a stack. Let's firstly look at a pull down. Let's say we have more than one link that we'd like to see. Now we could add heaps of buttons, but that's obviously going to get very cramped and crowded. So if I go to my tool and I go back to the testing panel, and let's actually give this a name. Let's call this links and testing. And because I've done that, I should update my YAML file as well. So I'll call this links and testing. And in my links file, what I'm going to do now is switch over this to a push button. So I'm going to call this, in this case, my links.pulldown, sorry. And a pull down can support any number of tools inside of it again. So in this case, I'm going to move my URL button, and I may also potentially create a new YAML file inside links, because I'm probably going to have more than one links file. So inside the links pull down, I'm going to create a YAML bundle. And in this case, I'll say, first of all, this is now going to be called GitHub. And I'll also create one called YouTube. And in the YAML file, which should be this one here, yep. I can now call this one GitHub and this one YouTube. And I don't need, in this case, the divider because I'm using a pull down. So they're all going to occur together. And now, of course, I can also get new icons as well. So I might just quickly get a couple of icons to keep this looking nice. So let's get a links icon and a YouTube icon. So sorry, I went to the wrong place. Icons 8. Icons 8's great because it has heaps of really common logos for things that exist already, such as YouTube. So I'll get my YouTube logo and I'll get my links logo. Let's just use this typical button here. So hopefully there's one that's in a size that we can use. There is. Great. So I'll download a YouTube icon and I'll download a links icon. And we can put a link to both the pull down but also the buttons inside the pull down as well, which is quite important. So I'm just going to go to my downloads and take those two icons, go back to my links, and we're going to put the icon for the links inside the icon pull-down folder. And then of course I'm going to put the logo for YouTube inside this one instead. Now I haven't actually changed my YouTube tool yet, so you are going to want to make sure you actually change the URL and the information. Now I actually want to get rid of that GitHub icon. And now I'll just change this YAML file to point instead to, you've guessed it, my YouTube channel. YouTube channel. And we just want to change its name. And if I do reload my toolbar now, it should pick up the formatting changes that I've made to it. Now, if you make very big changes to the layout of your toolbar, the order of those changes may not always be in sequence until you reopen Revit again, in my experience. But typically most small changes should be pretty much picked up perfectly. So we can see now my links. Okay, I think I've made a mistake in the my links icon potentially. I think I need to put this actually. Interesting. It seems like the icon for my links hasn't actually registered, which is because I've put it in the wrong folder, of course. So if I reload this, you should see that that error will be fixed just by doing a quick update to the location of that file, and it should refresh all those particular settings. But we should see now that hopefully we'll have our links drop down available with a new icon, but also supporting multiple options now. So I have the ability to pick more than one option inside that same menu. And these can really help you save a lot of space. One other option is to use stacks as well. So a stack is effectively a set of smaller icons that stack on top of one another. Let's make two Say Hi tools. So I'm going to have Say Hi and Say Hi 2. And what I'm going to do is put these into a stack. So I'm going to say hi.stack. And I believe that all I should have to do is put these into the stack. And I believe if I reload pyRevit, these should now be stacked icons as well. And you can do stacked pull downs. So you can create a lot of tools in a very small amount of space. You can see, for example, we have 3 stacked pull downs on top of each other in this particular tool. That is in pyRevit already. So it's pretty impressive just how much quick and easy UI construction there is. Now, I believe I've made a mistake here. So one thing I do like to do is sometimes have a look at how pyRevit has solved a problem. So you'll find typically in pyRevit, you'll have a folder where you can have a look at your extensions. So this is usually in your app data folder for users. So if I have a look at pyRevit tools, let's say that I want to achieve something a little bit like this. So what I'm going to do is find the modifier panel. And now we sort of understand how this works. So we have our tab, then we have our modifier panel. And in here, I want to look at my stack. So in this case, I can see maybe I might need a bundle to inform this how to work. But I believe maybe we might need a bundle inside the stack. I might just check one that has a single stack instead. So the analysis tab maybe. So we've got a tool stack with no YAML file required. What I might do is just double check. I might borrow this bundle file and I might save this as a copy to my own stack just to see if I can trick this into becoming a stack. I may potentially need to reboot pyRevit potentially because I have my .stack, which is correct. But then I don't have a bundle file in here. So what I can do with this now is hopefully just tell these tools to stack. Say hi and say hi too. So we'll try that. So say hi too. I believe hopefully this will work. Otherwise it could be an issue with the icon sizes potentially. I have had challenges before where I haven't managed to get some types of icons to stack on top of one another because they're too big to fit in this space. But we'll see if that works anyway. If not, I might just do a quick reboot on Revit. Now the great thing about what we're doing here, so I'll just reboot Revit and see if that fixes that problem, and if not, I'll remove the icons from these tools. But the good thing about what we're doing here is this is also going to happen cross-version. So any version of pyRevit you have, so Revit 2021, 2022, is going to be picking up these changes you're making as you go, because pyRevit shares those settings paths across all versions. pyRevit is only managed in one place, to my knowledge, on the computer. So if I open Revit 2021, 2022 on this computer, I'm also going to see the same toolbar when I open Revit with pyRevit installed. So that's really great. That's one of my favorite things about it. It's very easy to deploy and also maintain, assuming you're pointing to a toolbar on a server. So if I just open up another file, hopefully my tools are stacked now. If not, it could be an icon thing. But I'll just see my tools. Oh, there we go. So now we can see that my tools are very neatly stacked, which is great. So you can see it's very easy to customize a ribbon. I've done a little bit more customization on my own here, but I have a whole bunch of links. I have a tool that has 3 tools associated to it, so I put them together. I've got a stack of 2 links, and then a couple of drop downs, and then just a single push button. So I found that I can really quickly put together a lot of really great, efficient, and well laid out toolbars doing this. In the next video, we'll have a look at how you can also associate Dynamo scripts to pyRevit buttons, in this case push buttons, and then from there we'll move on to pyRevit tools themselves. So there we go, pretty easy, a well-designed tool, a beautifully designed tool you might say, but in this case you can see it's very quick and very simple to construct a toolbar with no programming knowledge required really. In the next video we're going to have a look at actually running Dynamo scripts through pyRevit on a toolbar like this one, and then we'll follow up from there by having a look at a couple of Python tools instead. So we'll build a couple of Python tools from the ground up. So you won't really need any Python experience for the next video, but the one after you may wish to brush up on your Python, just a little bit at least. Anyway, if you're not already following and subscribing, feel free to do so, and I look forward to seeing you in future similar videos. Thanks, take care.